Hi, and welcome to the second module of this series entitled Trauma-Informed Strategies for Classroom Teachers. In this particular presentation, I'm going to share some strategies and applications for supporting trauma-informed work in the classroom that classroom teachers can use to support their students who may have experienced traumatic events. Just as a reminder, if you didn't listen to the first two presentations in this series, this is part of a trauma-informed research collaborative formed at Georgia Southern University. I'm Regina Rahimi, a faculty member in the Department of Middle and Secondary Education, and part of this collaborative, which is also formed by Dr. Dolores Liston in the Department of Curriculum Studies, Dr. Tamara Hunt in the Department of Kinesiology, and Dr. April Garrity in the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders. We've come together to form this series of professional development modules to support the work of those people in the community that are working with youth who may have experienced trauma, or those that are interested in developing trauma-informed practices in their work. So as we look to this presentation, I'll be focusing on helping teachers create environments that limit stress, support optimum learning, and limit re-exposure to re-traumatization within their classrooms. And I'm going to focus on four particular areas. One, which starts with the teacher's commitment towards this work. And I'll be presenting ideas for both face-to-face and virtual classrooms. But it's important that as you begin this work of thinking about developing a trauma-informed practice, that you first examine your own beliefs and biases and strategies and practices, and then engage in your own personal and professional development on this topic. So that's the first part of engaging in this work. This presentation will focus on the physical environment of a classroom, classroom management and classroom practices that support trauma-informed work, and pedagogical and instructional and assessment strategies that teachers can employ if they want to develop a trauma-informed practice. So let's first look at the physical classroom environment. As I mentioned on the first slide of this presentation, this trauma-informed work is really based on the idea that what you really want to do is limit the stress for students in the classroom, and there are ways that you can mitigate that. This does not mean that takes anything away from the rigor or the expectations that students will perform. Rather, these practices can be put in place as daily routines and rituals that can support students who are dealing with some social emotional learning issues. So first, we recommend that there's a welcoming atmosphere in classrooms, and that would mean that it is a student-friendly environment. So student work is prominently displayed, demonstration of praising efforts of students. So when you walk into that classroom, you get a sense that students are accomplished and they're supported in their accomplishments. There's a visible recognition of students' families, their interests, and their lives present in the classroom, in the decorations, in the outside decorations in the classroom, in prominent displays in the room, and that there is a general overall positive and happy environment thriving in that classroom. We suggest that the colors of warm are warm colors and utilize natural sunlight. And when I say we, this is all taken from research, and I've cited it in this presentation at the end. Consider lamps that provide daylight, LED. Avoid bright colors and busy patterns, using soft, warm, stress-free colors. So those bright colors can sometimes trigger students who have experienced anxiety, ADHD, or maybe some other social emotional learning issues brought on by traumatic events. Natural light as much as possible. We know that vitamin D has a very positive element to social emotional learning and mental well-being. So as much as a teacher can utilize natural sunlight in their classroom, it's recommended. The ideal temperature for learning has been found through research to be 76 degrees. And so teachers can consider ways in which they could impact the temperature of the room, bringing in fans or bringing in heaters that may support that ideal temperature. Other considerations for the physical classroom that support trauma-informed practice is considering space for both collaboration and independent work, and how you arrange that space so that it supports both in a way that doesn't create stressful environments. Providing space for safe mobility, so hooks under desks or on walls to hang book packs so they aren't on the floor and in the way, and limit unnecessary furniture so students don't feel cramped and they can move around with ease. Consider technology stations or bring your own devices, but remember that might be students that don't own such devices. And so how can you help support those students in those environments? Designing with UDL in mind for spaces for de-escalation and reflection, and consideration of key classroom functions. Where do you hold your lectures? Where should the trash can be placed so that it doesn't disrupt other students in the learning environment? Where do students sharpen their pencils, for example? And is that in a space that doesn't disrupt other students or cause excess noise or disruption? As a reminder, and I've put links in here throughout this presentation for you to just investigate on your own, but there is a link to hydration and students' optimum learning, cognitive ability, and social emotional learning. So how can you, within the school day, support and encourage students' hydration practices? And then thinking about quality ventilation. Can you open windows? Can you use oscillating fans or maybe fans across the room so that there's that cross room ventilation? But that supports students' cognitive development, but also their social emotional learning for those students in particular that have been traumatized. Other classroom management procedures to consider in a trauma-informed practice are designing supports for de-escalating. Do you have a space, for example, when students are dealing with some social emotional imbalance? Is there a way that you can have them work through emotional problems? Teach relaxation strategies such as meditation and breathing. And there's a link here that can help you with some of those specific strategies that you could help students engage in. Doing this before class, before tests or other major assignments where students may have test anxiety or other anxiety about those classroom activities, you can start some of these meditative practices to support those. Engaging in strong anti-bullying practices, helping students with self-reflection, thinking about their emotional well-being and their emotional learning as they're going throughout the day. Collaboratively designing mission statements and classroom plans so that students understand what the goals are and they have a vested interest in the mission of those classrooms. Culturally responsive classroom management practices, conscious discipline, brain-friendly practices, which we'll talk about in just a minute, designing rituals and routines which are consistent. So how you open class every day, how you end class every day, how you transition from one activity to another. Consider adding those transitions on a schedule or agenda so students can anticipate what is coming next. Students that have been traumatized or are dealing with anxiety issues can be re-triggered when there are events in the classroom they do not expect. So the more that we can create agendas and scheduling and common transition times, the better we can mitigate some of those experiences for students. And then built-in conferencing time in classes. So you have opportunities one-on-one to work with students, all students, so that you can have an opportunity to really engage with what's going on with them, asking poignant questions about their day. And so how can you build in conferencing on a daily basis with students? And that may just be that you take 4 students a day and you conference with them, and the next day you take 4 students, but building that in as a solid part of your practice is recommended. As I mentioned before, there are some practices known as brain-friendly practices, and I've taken a lot of this from POSI 2019. But here are some of them in general. And again, please, after this presentation or during this presentation, click on some of these links, because you'll find an array of really good, concrete, easy ideas that you can employ in a classroom. So one brain-friendly practice is choice. How can you give some choice in what students are doing? Choice in activities, choice about how they work. Do they like to work independently? Do they like to work with groups? How can you provide some built-in choice in your activities? Giving students an opportunity to engage in self-awareness in your instructional practice through journaling, through autobiographies, through connections to their personal lives, helping them with mindfulness activities. And below you'll see that I've provided some links to free resources that can provide some opportunities for these self-awareness activities. Peer learning, cooperative learning, peer mentoring, peer assessment is a brain-friendly practice. I would just caution you to remember, as you probably already are aware, not all students thrive in environments where they're required to work with others. So you should get to know your students and make this an option if possible. But there are some links there that will provide some really good insight into activities you can use for peer learning. Other pedagogical practices that are engaging and recommended in a trauma-informed practice. Affective learning, helping be supportive of students and injecting appropriate humor. There's some links there to help you. Learning through the body, movement, breaking, hands-on activities is a brain-friendly practice. And the more that we can engage in those kinds of activities, the better off our students learn, and the better off we are creating an environment in which they can thrive. And so there's a couple of links there. Supporting metacognition. How do we help students think about their thinking and setting their own goals? And there's some links there for that practice. The expressive arts, we're finding more and more that as we've taken arts out of the classroom, that students really need that. And it's a great opportunity for them to be expressive in how they're feeling and how they're interacting with material. So there's some links there, as well as some links for practices for engaging in real world activities. Physical activity, provided some ideas for you there. There is a great practice known as brain gym, and these are activities that can be used at any grade level, and they are done right there in the classroom through stretching or drama or cross-lateral relaxation activities. So I would urge you to take a look at those as practices you can employ. And again, we know the importance of physical education and the visual performing arts. There's another link there. Remember that with instructional practices, especially for students that are dealing with trauma or cognitive delays, that they need multiple opportunities for engaging in material, priming that material as in an opening assignment, and then reiterating that assignment at the end of that, or that material at the end of the class. Keeping in mind lecture time and structuring questions so that students have ample time to engage in the material. Allowing students to have input, whether that's verbal, written, or some other form. Make criteria for success transparent so there are no surprises or anxiety around the idea of assessment. Considering practices that promote student success and limit student embarrassment. And there's some research out there that supports round robin reading. However, consider that if you put students on the spot and ask them to engage in activities where they may be embarrassed in front of their peers, that could be very harmful and could serve to re-traumatize students. Encourage students' own goal setting and utilize authentic assessments, so assessments that are embedded in their real life, in their interests, and make connections to the material as much as possible. Additional suggestions just for advocating for trauma-informed practices is, advocating for teacher preparation programs that introduce the candidates to trauma-sensitive practice. Advocate for trauma-informed practice within your schools and within your agencies that you're working with. Work with other organizations and fields to seek funding, shared understanding, and knowledge in the area of trauma-informed practice and pedagogy. So there's lots of people working in this area, but how can we pool our resources together and our ideas together to serve the youth in our community? And seek to develop professional learning networks within school districts or other districts to enhance understanding. This is one example that we have where we've pulled people from a variety of different fields, and we actually hope to grow this network. So if you're interested, please feel free to reach out to us because we'd love to have you as part of our trauma-informed network. And lastly, you'll see some resources here that could help you with a deeper understanding and connect you to other resources that could provide you opportunities to structure your classrooms or your offices, your organizations in a way that supports trauma-informed practice. And lastly, we have included this reflection survey. We're asking you to do this for all of our modules just to give us some support and some feedback on, was this helpful? What other information would you like to see in professional developments in the future? What other information would you like to have access to so that we can, as a university committee and group, can pull those access to those resources and provide them to you. I appreciate your time in listening to this presentation. I hope you have found some ideas that are helpful. Certainly, please reach out with any questions that you have or any ideas you have for further developing our collaborative around trauma-informed practice. And I wish you the best in all of your work. Thank you.